Right, this is a gearbox from a Royal Enfield diesel that I've been working on, hence the extra long gearbox main shaft there. But that's by the by. What I wanted to talk about with this one is the matter of what you put inside the gearbox. Now, lots of people are under the misapprehension that you need to fill them with grease, but I say that that is just a bodge conjured up by Indians as a slapdash repair to stop oil leaks. Because if we look there, we've got a seal, and that is a new seal that I've just fitted because I've just rebuilt this gearbox. But also inside the gearbox sprocket nut there's a felt seal there. I've fitted a sealed bearing in there, which I've removed the inner seal, but I've left the outer seal in just as a little bit of insurance as well. But basically, when the gearbox sprocket is fitted, and then you screw up this nut tightly, this felt ring inside it bears up tightly against the sleeve gear shaft there, and that acts as an oil seal to stop any oil escaping between the main shaft and the main shaft sleeve, which is very unlikely anyway, because the main shaft sleeve goes into about this far anyway. So when the bike is upright, you've got your oil level plug there. We'll come to that in a minute, we'll discuss that in more detail in a minute. And if we hold a straight edge across there, that's the level of the oil in the gearbox when you're up to the level plug, which is well below the main shaft and the main shaft seal and the main shaft sleeve. In fact, we're halfway up on the lay shaft. So the lay shaft and its gears fling the oil up to the main shaft, and even when you're leaned over, okay, I know that in some instances these gearboxes can leak oil when you lean them over on the prop stand, when you lean the bike over, because some lean over a fair way. But if that seal's in good condition, and this one is, that shouldn't really happen in any case. So I stand by putting oil in these gearboxes and not grease, although I've opened loads of them up and they've been full of grease. And the only way that you can get the grease out is to actually dismantle or partially dismantle the gearbox. You've got to take the outer cover off, the inner cover off at least, and if not all the gears, you've got to sort of try and scoop out what's inside there, and it's a hell of a mess. It won't run out of the drain plug here. Now I'm going to come to this, and we see, and I'll be up front, I'll be honest, I'm not going to hide anything. I'll go back a page. This is the old Redditch manual, and it does actually say, there is mention here, in normal climates the recesses in the gearbox should be packed with soft grease, and the box itself should be filled up to the correct level with gear oil. On no account must heavy yellow grease be used. Okay, now I take the recesses of the gearbox to mean perhaps the open bearing race of that main bearing. Perhaps you'd pack grease into that, and perhaps the workings of the selector mechanism in here, which is quite common to see greased. But as for the rest of it, oil. And we see here in the Redditch manual again, gearbox oil filler hole. Now that tells me that you put oil in that gearbox, and down here we've got gearbox oil level. The gearbox is replenished with oil by removing a plug in the top, and the correct level can be checked by removing a second plug lower down on the right hand side looking at the cover. On earlier models a dipstick is attached, well that's the British ones, to the filler plug for measuring the level of oil, or was provided loose in the toolkit. On some models the filler plug is on the side of the gearbox, and in such cases the oil should be level with the plug hole and no dipstick is required. They're the earlier shaped Redditch gearboxes. The oil will be found to run into the box more easily on these models if the engine is started up and allowed to tick over, so that the gears and shafts rotate. So no question, you put oil in those gearboxes. And if we just go here, this book now, this is an Indian Enfield Bullet parts list, and if we look here, we've got 42 there, that plug, and that one's also called 42 because they're the same as each other. And then you've got this one here, 40, and if we look up, 40 oil level plug, 42 plug for oil filler and drain, no mention of grease. Sorry folks, you put oil in these, and I get pretty good results by using 2050 engine oil in the gearbox. In fact, I use 2050 oil, the gearboxes, the primary chain cases, the engines themselves obviously, and even the forks. But if you want to buy 4 different varieties of oil and or shovel some grease in there, all the best to you. But the problem with grease as well is you can change oil. That's what the drain plug is for. When you give the gearbox an oil change, all the dirt and any particles of metal from wear and tear in there will come out with the oil as well. Then you put that plug back in, you take your level plug out, you take your filler plug out, and you put fresh clean oil in, and off you go again. If that's full of grease, you can't do that, and the particles from any wear and tear get churned up and mixed with the grease, and gradually over time it turns itself into what is nothing more than a very fine grinding paste. Another reason, and good reason, for not using oil is the Bullet engines, even in 500cc form, are not really that powerful, and there's a hell of a lot more drag with grease than there is with oil. So personally, I go by what both the British Redditch Royal Enfield Bullet books go by, and obviously the Indian parts book here labels the plugs as oil, filler and drain plugs, and I put oil in the gearbox. So well worth considering, dismissing the Indian bodges, like I say, because that's what they were. Any port in a storm for them to fix something and get it out the workshop quickly. As I found with this gearbox was working with 3 vital parts inside it missing. We had the thrust washer off the between the kickstart shaft and the big lay shaft gear, that was missing. There was an oil thrower ring inboard of the gearbox bearing on this side on the main shaft, that was missing, and even the steel bushing on the end of the lay shaft that runs in the bronze bush was missing, so the splined end of the lay shaft was running in that bush. In fact, it was on a different gearbox shell. There was damage to the original gearbox shell, that's why I rebuilt this, so we had an empty casing, but so there's a different lay shaft bush there now, so that's alright. But all that lot was buried in grease and churning away, and still working, but not very good at all really. So a well assembled gearbox filled with the correct amount of oil should work and last for a very long time.